You know what I think YouTube needs more of? List videos. What's going on, guys? Nate here. And Skyrim boasts a proud, colorful cast of characters with their own personalities, backstories, and relationships. However, throughout such a rich bunch, there's bound to be a few folks who aren't whom they say or appear to be. So sit back, relax, and enjoy as we take a look at 5 Skyrim characters who aren't who you might think they are. Starting off, should you head over to the Nightgate Inn, you'll encounter a character named Fulltime. He has no unique dialogue options, and generally just stands around and drinks all day. If you ask the innkeeper about business, he'll note that Fulltime is a regular who comes in and, quote, drinks a lifetime of bad memories away, implying that Fulltime likely had a rather traumatic past. Head inside of Fulltime's room and you will find an abundance of books related to the Great War, the Thalmor, the Rise of the Blades, and more. Next to his bed is a dagger as well, suggesting he still lives in fear of something. Should you pickpocket this interesting character, you'll discover he actually wields a blade sword. This is pretty huge news, because the only other characters who wield this weapon are essential to the main quest line, and members of the Blades themselves, before its downfall. It's mentioned that there are still a few Blades left alive though, scattered throughout Tamriel, and it looks like Fulltime may in fact be one of them. Furthermore, if you look behind the Nightgate Inn's counter, you'll see a hidden warhammer next to a copy of a book titled Killing Before You Are Killed, heavily alluding to the fact that the innkeeper himself also seems to be rather weary of some sort of hostile visitor. Perhaps he knows Fulltime's secret. Only solidifying this theory is that if you approach Fulltime while wearing Thalmor robes, he will actually turn hostile and attack you. The Thalmor are the body that essentially forced the Blades into hiding, got their faction disbanded, and are currently hunting them down. So it seems very clear that Fulltime resents and fears these folks for what they did to his former companions and his faction as a whole. At number 2 is a character named Juwan from Rorikstead. Juwan doesn't hide his backstory and is more than happy to share it. He's a former healer who served within the Imperial Legion during the Great War. He saved Rorik, the current leader of Rorikstead's life, during a battle, and after the conflict, he settled with him on this very farm. Okay, seems reasonable. However, Rorikstead has had a rather interesting past of its own. You see, for years, the land it's been on has never been able to effectively sustain crops. Harvests consistently failed and yields were low, all due to the very poor soil it's built upon. But by the time you arrive, the problem has entirely corrected itself. The farms are now booming, and somehow the soil is now arguably the best in all of Skyrim. Juwan and the locals will tell you this is the product of hard work and dedication. Nothing more, nothing less. Alright, fair enough. But talk to the townsfolk, and you'll find that there are no living mothers in the town, all passed away during childbirth. What does this have to do with Juwan? Well, he's a healer in this small town, so during these births, he should be around assisting. But that's not the most damning piece of evidence you'll find against this shady character. Sneak into his house, and you'll find a book titled Spirit of the Daedra, reading material typically only indulged in by Daedra worshippers. Though Juwan claims to be a follower of the 8 Divines, there's also a chance that you may overhear him talking with a child named Cecil, who will ask him if he's willing to teach her some magic tricks. In response, he immediately starts to scold her and demand she remain quiet, lest the town would find out about their little secret.
By the 8, keep your voice down. Do you want the entire village to learn our secrets?
To me, this looks like Bethesda is subtly hinting that this magic-practicing farmer may have struck a deal of sorts with the Daedra in return for his village's bountiful harvests. None of the other townsfolk seem in on this. Even Rorik himself mentions that he wonders if higher powers are at work when talking to Juwan. Juwan simply says nothing in return. At number 3 is Sibyl Stentor, the court wizard of Skyrim's capital, Solitude. A quick glance into her eyes will reveal that she is in fact a vampire. Most of the court seems aware of this fact, or at least aware that something's off about her, but for the most part she seems rather tame for a bloodsucker. She shows a great level of affection for the former High King, and it's hinted that she only preys upon humans from Solitude's dungeon, who were already sentenced to death row anyway. So altogether, she's pretty chill for a vampire. However, in the Dawnguard DLC, you can find a journal in Redwater Den that suggests she may have darker intentions. She isn't specifically named in these writings, but it does state that a vampire has gained a considerable amount of power in Solitude and revealed Redwater Den's location to Harkon's forces. Considering Sibyl is the only vampire in Solitude, and certainly in a very strong position, it's likely that her loyalties to the crown may not be so solid after all. At number 4 is Hogni Redarm. He's a meat vendor in the city of Markarth, and seems to be particularly proud of his craft, often discussing passerbys with not so subtle displays of his various meat cuts. If approached by the player, he may say, quote, "I make a lot of my enemies. People are always trying to cheat me." Sounds firm, but still reasonable, I suppose. But in the Daedric quest, The Taste of Death, it is revealed that making a lot of his enemies may meant to have been interpreted in a much more literal fashion. He can be found alongside a crowd of cannibals preparing to feast on an innocent man during that quest. He even jokes that he sells human meat at his own stall. Only making this even more worrisome is that Hogney has a plate of beef sitting fresh in his room in the Silver Blood Inn. Hogney claims he gets his meat from a nearby Orcish stronghold, but I think it's safe to say that's not the whole truth. And finally at number 5 is Movar. In Skyrim, the Laid to Rest quest is one of the most in-depth side quests in the game. It tells a story of strange happenings in the town of Morthaw, and suspicion revolving around a woman named Alva. Investigating this will result in you discovering a vampire named Morvar is responsible for all this damage. You see, he turned Alva into a vampire to have her serve him, and he plans to take over the entire town. Thankfully, you get the chance to dispatch this Scorch and save the town's people, but Morvar has an interesting story of his own. He's actually the subject of the book Immortal Blood, which can be purchased at a few vendors or found in various dungeons, including Morvar's own cave, or even can be found in certain locations in the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion. Yes, it's that old. And in there you will learn his true story. Morvar was actually a member of the Cyrodiil Fighters Guild, and an accomplished vampire hunter himself. He hated the creatures, and he even hunted down a few Volokar members. However, periodically throughout his career, he would stay at a Cyrodiilic chapel, where he would meet with a priest who would give him information on vampiric clans, who he would then set off and hunt. But on one fateful night, upon returning to the chapel after a month of slaying more vampires than Sarah Michelle Gellar, the priest turned on him. It turns out this helpful man of religion was a vampire all along. The priest would turn Morvar into one of the things he hated the most. This likely happened hundreds upon hundreds of years before you get to encounter him in Skyrim, as these events are documented in a book that exists all the way back in Oblivion, but still a rather tragic tale behind one of the strangest villains. And there are 5 Skyrim characters who weren't who you thought they were. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always very much appreciated. And what weird happenings have you seen going on with specific characters? Who do you have your suspicions about? Leave a comment down below. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and I hope to see you all in my next video. Peace out, everyone.